you that you shouldn't trust anything you read on the internet, and you should always go look for evidence that's going to substantiate whatever you're interested in. That's not on the internet. And I teach beyond public history, and I tell students when they begin to write a research topic, go to the internet, look around, see what's out there, find out what's interesting, and then write down your ideas and never look at the internet again, right? And do the rest of your research outside of that computer. So, no, I'm not going to.
I didn't think you would.
I mean, it depends on the institution. I would trust anything on the Library of Congress website. Because that's the federal government, and they would never lie. Right? But I mean, that's far more reliable than, I was going to say a nice neo-Confederate website or something.
Well, you mentioned the crowdsourcing and people doing transcribing and such. Well, who's to say it's accurate? And I personally have an issue with that.
And in many cases, it isn't. I mean, but that is true of transcriptions that have been published for the last century, right? I mean, you can still pick up volumes of the letters of Thomas Jefferson and find errors from the transcriptions. And so, I mean, as with any source, you have to be skeptical, and you have to look for validation of that source through other sources if it's possible.
It's job security for historians, right? 20 years from now, someone has to discover the mistake and set it right.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We've probably got time for one or two more questions. Daryl?
I have a question for Dan and Laura. We've talked about a lot of interesting topics, where the state of the field is, and some interesting questions about recruitment, retention, and job placement of students. I'm curious where you guys see where you are. Your program is relatively young in the history of public history programs, and where do you see where you guys are, and what are your ideas about where you thought you're heading?
Can I plead I've been here 6 weeks? No, we're not going to take that argument. Dan, you start.
So I think this falls to me. I think that tonight's event and the audience up here is a good sign that we've done much better than I expected to when I showed up here in 2010. It certainly exceeded the departments and universities' expectations. Our students have exceeded what I thought was going to be probable, in that having gotten a degree at a institution that trains students and gives them MAs in public history and has been very successful over time placing people, I was skeptical about what kind of opportunities students with simply a certificate or even a major field in public history are going to have in a traditional MA program. Our students have done very well on the job market, and I hope that reflects some of the things that we're doing here. I think it speaks to the fact that, and I say this to everyone I encounter, Louisville is an incredible place to do public history, and this region is an incredible place to do public history. And it's amazing that there hasn't been a dedicated program in the field here previously, but gosh, we've got a lot of small to mid-sized museums, historic sites, historic house museums, a great state historical society, a great state archives and library. I mean, there's an incredible array of institutions that recognize that they're involved in public history, and then there's a whole boatload of ones that need the message. So I think we've done remarkably well, and so that's good, and I want to pat ourselves on the back. And now that Lara's here, we can do even better. At the same time, my thinking is that we face the same challenges that the field is facing as a whole, and that is that, jobs are very competitive. As a place that trains public historians, we need to think of ourselves not just as a program that's, we want to do serious public history, we want to make it challenging, we want to give people skill sets for long-term careers. I want to convince my colleagues and other people at the university that what we're doing is the same caliber work as traditional scholarship, and this is part of our contribution to a dialogue that involves the community, larger audiences, works beyond the boundaries of the academy. And I think there are real challenges there, but Laura's hiring is a sign of the investment the university and the department's made in public history. And so I think things look good.
And I would add to that I think there are two really powerful categories of assets that aren't in every place. One is part of what Dan was talking about, the university as a whole. I think the history of this institution's commitment to civic engagement and being involved in the community, and everything that I've seen so far has underscored that is indeed true, and that is also perceived outside of the walls of this room, which isn't always the case, right? Universities often tell themselves that they're doing this kind of work, and if you ask anyone outside of the institution, that's not the answer you get. That has been my experience here. And then I think also the rich professional culture that's in Louisville that I've seen a little snapshot of, which is very welcoming and excited about collaboration and partnerships and just sort of the general zeitgeist of the city and the region as a whole, I think has a lot of rich opportunities that hopefully Dan and I'll be continuing to tap into, and our students will continue to tap into. And we have a fantastic level of students. I've been really impressed with the caliber of the students that are currently here.
Time for one more, and then we should adjourn to have something to eat and mingle and continue the conversation in the halls. But sir.
My name is Thomas Skaggs. I'm also a graduate student here at the University of Louisville. And going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, in terms of anybody being a historian, I recently read a little bit of Bill O'Reilly's Killing Lincoln and found it riddled with inaccuracies and misconceptions. And when do we as public historians, and I guess this is more popular history, but when do we as public historians need to draw the line between what gets people to our museums and what is filling their head with lies, misconceptions? Because working at National Park, I encountered a lot of people coming there having read his book and being very interested in the subject, and that's great. But what was in their head was wrong. And as an interpreter, I kind of have to fix that. So how do we draw the line there?
And what do you mean by draw the line? Kick them out of the audience?
As an intellectual, and not as an interpreter, how we want to, I guess, promote public history. We want people coming in the door. How do we draw the line and say we don't want these people coming in the door with this conception, or how do we manage
But
that?
don't you think, to me, those are the ones we want coming in the door?
Yeah.
Those are the ones we want to come in and bring their myths with them and say to you, well, I thought this happened. And then you say, I can understand why you think that because it's in our public media all the time. But let me tell you the way this side interprets it, and go read this book. Go read 5 books on this instead of 1, and draw your own conclusion. I think, to me, and I very much consider myself, even though I've been in the academy my entire profession, I very much consider myself a public historian because the way I imagine it is I'm willing to trust the public to eventually come to the right conclusion. And so, and you know, we snicker, but that's the exact same attitude you have to have when you teach students, right? You have to trust that eventually they will be able to do the interpretation for themselves and they don't have to keep coming back to me for it. Yes, you have a public that's probably with you for an hour, you know, and so you do everything you can in that hour to give them the tools to go out and imagine how they might expand their knowledge a little bit more. Some will, and a lot won't. But, you know, I just think every person who walks through the door is an opportunity. And you need to dispel them of their beliefs when they're wrong, and you need to reinforce their beliefs when they're right. You know, it's not just all about telling people they have the wrong history. So.
Thank you very much for a great talk. Thank you all for coming. We have food and drink out in the lobby and an opportunity to talk amongst ourselves and continue these conversations. Thank you very, very much.
Deal.